All right, so minimizing the hazard of wildfires. So not all fires, first of all, I should say for fire management, not all fires need to be suppressed. Some of them should be, depending on the conditions, obviously. But the best way to do fire management is going to be through science, education, data collection, and through the use of prescribed burns. So in the case of science, basically we cannot manage a fire if we don't understand it. So in order to understand a fire, we need to understand its regime. By understanding its regime, I mean that we need to understand the types of fuels that a particular area can have in order for the fire to use, what the typical fire behavior in that area may be given the conditions, and also what the fire history of the area is. And with that, I mean knowing the frequency and the recurrence interval at which wildfires occur. In terms of education, we can basically make people aware of the wildfire as a hazard and know how to minimize their personal risk and their property risk. In terms of data collection, we use a few things. So remote sensing is used for mapping the vegetation and to determine the fire potential. So remote sensing has to do with basically satellite imagery that helps us with that. And then based on whatever information we get from that, there is GIS work that is being done every day. There is updates on these frames of vegetation cover basically, and types of vegetation that are done for GIS mapping to do. GIS stands for Geographic Information System. So that's what can be done through the use of remote sensing. So in terms of prescribed burns, what we can do, basically, before I continue on, prescribed burns are going to be scheduled burns that avoid the buildup of fuel in the event of an actual wildfire occurring, which would be just catastrophic if that fuel were to be left there. So each prescribed burn has a written plan outlining the objectives, where and how it will be carried out, and how will the burn be evaluated. That's within the written plan. So in order to do a prescribed burn, they need to predict the weather very well, the fuel type that you have and the amount of fuel that you have, and they need to know the topography pretty well. So basically understand the factors that will determine a wildfire behavior. Same thing for a prescribed burn. In fact, there's been a few prescribed burns that don't go all very well because the weather patterns change. The wind pattern changes in many of these, and it can actually be very catastrophic, as it was in a New Mexico burn in the year 2000. In this burn, 280 homes burned near Los Alamos. And the fire itself, I don't know exactly how big the area was that it was supposed to burn. But because of the wind pickup, it ended up burning 190 kilometers squared. That was not expected. So there's a few prescribed burns that don't go well. And this is partly because of regulations, partly because of poor planning, and unfortunately, sometimes because of weather conditions that are none of our control and can be very spontaneous. They can change very drastically. But again, if prescribed burns go well, they are fantastic in terms of, avoiding the fuel buildup that could fuel a wildfire of catastrophic amounts. So prescribed burns are still a very, very good way of avoiding catastrophic fires. So what is the perception and the adjustment to the wildfire hazard? So unfortunately, many people don't take wildfire as a very real, if you would, hazard. In fact, in California, which as we know is a state that burns every year, people seem not to be aware of this hazard. And so many people who still live in the wildland urban interface, kind of like in the hills, where the fire is a very big hazard, they don't care nearly as much. And we'll go through another little bit in the next slide about reasons why. But in 1991, as you may know, there was a gigantic fire that burned 3,800 houses and apartments, mostly in Oakland, but also a little bit in Berkeley. And it burned over 6.5 kilometers squared. So definitely a major fire, and obviously it was because of the prone area to wildfires, which is that area. So there are still a few things that we can do to adjust to the wildfire hazard. So fire danger alerts and warnings are given. Watches are usually given within 12 to 72 hours before a wildfire might come, to your location. And then a red flag warning is given 24 hours before. And this is, based on monitoring of the wildfire itself. We can do fire education. So this is one of the things you guys are doing right now, which I think is great. So you can take classes, different presentations and media coverage are done at schools, or also like at town meetings. Things like that would be just great places to educate people. But again, however, many people still think that this is not really a hazard that could happen to them, and so they take it for granted that it's going to be fine. Also, codes and regulations, I think, are one of the best ways to ensure that people, are safe, and not just people, but also the environment. So enforce building codes for resisting materials in your property, banning outdoor fires. I think there should be more regulation based on building in certain areas, like that wildland urban area should be better regulated. Also, insurance and government aid, I think, should be better regulated as well. So insurance and government aid for areas that are at risk of wildfires, mostly government aid after a wildfire has come and maybe destroyed your home or your property, are things that I think need to be reevaluated. So insurance itself may provide a false sense of security, and it makes people more willing to live in these fire-prone areas. And then government aid just kind of tells them, okay, if my property burns, it's okay because I'll get my money back, which I think is terrible. And I actually will post a link for basically this same phenomenon going on for areas that flood incredibly frequently. So this has to do a little bit more with both flooding by rivers and also in coastal areas, flooding by hurricanes, but it's the same idea of this insurance and government aid play, and why people don't really care that their property is being flooded. So it's the same idea in terms of the forest fires. If they are ongoing near your property and your property gets burned, as long as you have insurance and government aid, then why should you care, right? So I think that there should definitely be more regulations on this, but I'll post that link to that podcast. It's pretty cool, and I hope you guys enjoy it, because I think it's very important to know this stuff and be aware. Okay, another thing that is done is evacuation. I think evacuation is probably the best way to protect life overall. If you're not there, obviously you're going to preserve your life. Your property may have a different outcome, but at least you are alive. And then table 13.1, it gives you like a basic idea of things that you should do to prepare your home if you live in that wildland urban interface and the area where you live in is prone to fire. So here where we live in Idaho is prone to fire, so I recommend that you check it out. It's a very good table and fairly long, which is why I didn't put it here in the slides, but it's in your book again towards the end of it. So check it out. It's going to be great for fire protection of your home. And I think it also recommends a few things for, kits that you should have prepared as well. All right, everybody. So again, this is the last module that you'll have that is actually due. I will try to finish that extra credit module and put it up as soon as possible. But if I don't get to it, I don't get to it. So keep an eye open for that. I will, again, put announcements as per usual about your exam 3, about your class project, and about the final exam. So again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, please email me or come during my office hours. I will be happy to talk to you about the class material, about the exams, about the class project, about your career path. Let me know, okay? All right, have a good week. Good luck.